it seemed a scattergun approach, which I can't believe such intelligent, successful individuals would actually go down that path.
We are counting down to the results of the Ineos end-of-season review, alongside Marcus Rashford's form, Luke Shaw's England inclusion, and the future of Bruno Fernandes. It's all coming up a day earlier this week on your latest episode of the Theatre of Red. Well, hello there, one and all, and welcome along to episode 5 of the official Theatre of Red podcast. It is, of course, the eve of England's final warm-up fixture ahead of their Euro 24 Group C opener against Serbia. And I'm delighted to welcome a man who has taken time away from Gareth Southgate's camp to share a conversation with yours truly today. Mr. Henry Winter, how are you on this beautiful day, sir?
I'm very good. Just been watching England training, just admiring the talent they've got out there, and that's even before Jude Bellingham returns to the fold.
In this particular stage, when you consider the attacking output that is there a little extra spark within the camp?
There is amongst the players, but I think it's very much, there's no arrogance there, there's no swagger. That disappeared when Southgate came in. There hasn't really been, it's a slight myth, there hasn't really been a swagger or an arrogance about the players. Probably since 2006, they learnt their lesson there. They're heading back to Germany. Now, no, there's quite a grounded squad embodied by the captain, Harry Kane, who starts against Iceland on Friday evening. They're just a pretty grounded bunch. It's partly this generation of players, the academy system, their parenting, whatever, but there's not too many huge egos, and I think that's a reflection on Southgate's choices. He likes good tourists, potential egos you'd never have anywhere in the squad. So, yeah, there's a spark, there's a snap to training, but they know the challenge in store. They can see the quality of the French, the quality of the Portuguese in particular. The Germans seem to be timing their run well to a tournament. So they know the challenges out there, but they'll respect everyone, but they won't fear anyone.
And as a neutral, it is going to make for fascinating viewing. From a Manchester United perspective, I want to begin with the most bizarre of scenarios at the club, and that is, of course, the unique end-of-season review that is occurring with Sir Jim Ratcliffe and his Ineos powerhouse. It's one that has journalists and supporters scratching their head daily, on top of the many items that are up for discussion. The future of Erik ten Hag is a daily conversation with so much of it unknown. The reasoning behind the lack of communication from the club is obviously an unknown variable, but with a variety of reports that are now seemingly contradicting themselves for several weeks, what do you make of this entire situation that is occurring at the club at the moment?
Well, first I take a step back. And this idea of an end-of-season review. Elite organisations like Manchester United and like Ineos have constant reviews, whether it's a sort of sit-down, whether it's Zoom, whether it's just an appraisal running through Jim Ratcliffe's mind and Dave Brailsford's mind. They will always be looking at the pursuit of excellence. You don't have marginal gains just in late May and early June. You focus on it throughout the year and how you can improve. Every day you get up, how you can improve. End of the day, have a review. How did I do today? How was the training session? How was the meeting that I held? That's just the way these elite organisations and individuals work. In terms of the review, we can come on to the manager's position, but the review, which should again be going on all season, and will obviously accelerate when Dan Ashworth, who's a brilliant appointment, when he eventually arrives from his very well-tended garden, he will have this laser focus, this organisation, this meticulous approach, and that is really what Manchester United need. They've needed more direction on the football side because the Glazers have just been so shamefully hands-off. So in terms of the review, you need to look at issues in the training ground. I went to see Ten Hag a year ago and he showed me around bits of it. You could just see that it wasn't the cliff level, but it hadn't really been updated much, all the time that I've been sort of going there to sort of interview people. And Cristiano Ronaldo was right when he did his piece with Piers. Some of the things he shouldn't have said, but actually the criticism he made about the training ground was completely right. Particularly if you go to, I've been at Tottenham Hotspur's training ground today, magnificent. Manchester City's, NASA level, Arsenal's, Yeah, I mean Arsenal's is good. You know, they are made it. Leicester City. Leicester City got a better training ground than Manchester United. That should not be the way of things. So Manchester United will invest in that. You know, I think when Jim Ratcliffe looked around, he could see that. Obviously, you need a new stadium. Old Trafford is a special place, and due respect has to be shown by the architects when things like the Munich tunnel are moved and the statues, and it's the shrine to the greats of Manchester United. But Manchester United should be having a better stadium than Bayern Munich, should be having a better stadium than Tottenham Hotspur. Tottenham Hotspur put a brilliant stadium on a tiny bit of land. I don't know how they did it. Manchester United have got the area around. So part of the review has to take in that as well. Then coming back to recruitment, there has to be a review into recruitment. Has the recruitment been good enough since Sir Alex Ferguson left? And of course, damagingly, as a few people have pointed out, David Gill left at the same time, which was crazy. They allowed the two of them, Gill, to go as well. Gill should have stayed on another year. So recruitment needs. So this review, but this is a constant process that flows like a sort of ticker tape on Sky going through someone's mind about how you improve, constant review. So coming back to your point about Ten Hag, I mean, I've got a bit of sympathy for him. I don't know what the final verdict's going to be, or the indications before the cup final was that, you know, he would leave and move on. And I was in his press conference afterwards, and he was pretty defiant, saying, "Well, if Manchester United don't want me, I can go and take my trophy-winning abilities elsewhere." And maybe they step back and they look at what he's achieved with a ridiculous amount of injuries he's had. I know other clubs have had injuries, like Chelsea have had injuries, but you know, he's really had to deal with it. You know, Lisandro Martinez just makes such a difference in terms of ability to use the ball well, ability to stand up to elite centre forwards, just that leadership. He's sort of, you know, you saw him when he was leaving the pitch in the cup final. The fact that his spiky character, but also his very clever, cunning way of running down the clock, that he quite happily got drawn into a little bit of a sort of dispute which ran down the clock with Kyle Walker. So players like him, you know, have been hugely missed during the season. I just think that the frustration for Manchester United fans must have been, well, why didn't Ten Hag go to this system before? I mean, Rasmus Højlund is a terrific young player, works incredibly hard, but actually I thought the system that Ten Hag used with really no number 9 at all, and Bruno just played it absolutely brilliant. And people criticise Bruno Fernandes, but what a player he's been for you in terms of a captain, a leader. I know he moans at referees, but he cares. And that's what Manchester United have not had enough of in recent years. They haven't had owners who cares. The Glazers don't really care. They just care about the bottom line. I've been saying it pretty much since they arrived in 2005. And you know, the players have got to show how much they care on the pitch. So all those things have got to be looked at. I mean, it looks like the direction of travel is that Ten Hag may not survive as Manchester United manager. On his body of work over the season, particularly in the Premier League, was it finished 8th? That's not good enough for a club of Manchester United. But 2 trophies. His first season was good. Got into the Champions League. Okay, they surrendered in the Champions League. That was really disappointing. But there's a really good coach in there. There's a really good manager in there. There's certain things he needs to improve. He needs to be a little bit more, I think, positive in press conferences, not just to keep the media happy, but because it's, you know, ultimately we're just a conduit to the fans, and he wants to send a message to the fans. And he can't kid the fans. He can't come out and say we were playing dynamic football when you just lost. You know, that's Manchester United fans are too intelligent for that. So, you know, there's certain things that he needs to tweak, but, you know, he's a good manager. And if he leaves Manchester United, he will go on and win trophies elsewhere, I'm sure of it. But personally, I hope he stays because he's a decent man who cares. He works really hard, and constant turnover of managers. Has that really worked since Sir Alex has left? I don't think so.
And I would share the opinion. I very much hope that he gets another season at the club under a proper footballing hierarchy to continue on the work that he has done. But one thing that I find really, really bemusing about this entire situation, largely on the thought process, and as utterly bizarre as it may seem, it's angled around the fact that Sir Jim Radcliffe and Ineos have never publicly stated anything about the future of Ten Hag. It is the Dutchman really who has spoken to the media, stated that his new boss's desire is to rebuild everything alongside him. I know that it may seem absurd, but if Ten Hag were to stay, Have you considered the possibility that Ineos would simply ignore the topic about his future and everything that has gone over the last couple of weeks and continue with the manager working from the viewpoint that the story ultimately began and circulated through the media and not through Ineos? Is that a possibility in your eyes?
They'd have to address it. They would have to release a statement, particularly if they were going to extend his contract. And particularly when Dan Ashworth arrives, he's going to have every question thrown at him. And Dan Ashworth has always been, in my experience, incredibly honest and open with the media. He's never hidden away from anything. Obviously, he's hiding, well, not hiding at the moment, but he's not public at the moment because he's going through this protracted exit from Newcastle United. But no, I don't see why they should have made statements. I think when they came out and congratulated the players and the staff afterwards, they should have, after the cup final, they should have acknowledged what Ten Hag had done in difficult circumstances, i.e. the injuries, i.e. the constant speculation about his future. I think he's handled himself very well. So, yeah, also, Ratcliffe has actually been pretty open. He's talked to fans, he's talked to the media, so I don't think you can suddenly turn that off. But I do understand why there was an element of radio silence in the lead up to the cup final. Because he would have just fueled it. If they'd come out and said something, it would have been, oh, the dreaded vote of confidence, or he's off after the cup final. But look, it certainly wasn't as grim as 2016 when Louis van Gaal walked into the dressing room having won the FA Cup and everyone looked up and they knew he was off and he didn't. So maybe they've learned a little bit from that. But anyway, I hope he stays because he's a decent person. And also, who is there out there? I mean, I see all these names in the headlines, and they're all very well sourced stories. And I'm sure there has been conversations because elite organisations have always got one eye on the future. But they're all completely different characters. I mean, Kieran McKenna is a head coach. He's an outstanding head coach, and he will be an elite Champions League manager. I mean, I've seen him at work. I've interviewed him. He is absolute top level, and obviously he's known very well at Carrington. And he's got emotional connections with Manchester United, and some of the players know him as well. But he's a completely different manager to Thomas Tuchel, who sort of comes in and wants to immediately boss the Champions League, and he works with what he's got and he gets on with things. To other managers who want to build. So I thought it was very strange seeing some of the names because there just seemed no consistency of approach. Do Manchester United want a manager? Do they want a head coach? Do they want someone who's just happy to work with what he's got, or do they want someone like a Pochettino who wants a little bit more influence on recruitment? So it seemed a scattergun approach, which I can't believe such intelligent, successful individuals as Ratcliffe and Brailsford would actually go down that path. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see. I mean, Ashworth knows Potter. He knows Southgate. Southgate for me, I don't think is top level for a Manchester United. It'd be good bringing on the younger players, and he knows a lot of the players. But yeah, I mean, it's just the headlines didn't make sense to me.
Likewise, I find it all very, very bemusing. But sticking on Southgate and on England, and given your proximity to the English camp, one notable omission was Marcus Rashford. It's one that didn't come as a surprise to many, given his highly publicised dip in form this season. Within the United supporters base, I think the consensus is bemusement as to how such a talented footballer can endure so many ups and downs. But within that, I have always viewed Rashford as a confidence player, very much like Anthony Martial was. But Rashford also seems to be largely introverted, and for whatever reason, is generally the target of so much public abuse and so much slander. Obviously, there's a misconception about footballers that because they earn a fortune, abuse is something that should be expected and it should be something that they deal with. But I'm never going to accept that. While focusing on what he can bring to the field, which was largely on display during his imperious display at Wembley against Manchester City, are you surprised that he maybe wasn't brought along provisionally when you consider the flair and the unknown element that he can bring to that England squad in difficult fixtures?
Well, first, I think your appraisal of the situation surrounding Marcus Rashford is 100% correct. Secondly, in terms of, I was surprised he wasn't in the squad, particularly it was a 33-man training squad. But I think Southgate showed that he was bold. He also omitted Jordan Henderson. But the thing about Rashford is, as you say, there's a slightly introverted character there. He's dealt with a couple of close bereavements in the last year or so, which have distracted him. He clearly needs to refocus, whether it's tracking back on the pitch or making sure that he's 100% dedicated and focused off the field. But there's still a good player in there. Was he 26, 27? You know, you can't write him off. You look at Luka Modric, who's just about to get another year's contract at Real Madrid, and he's sort of 38. So look, there's life in Rashford. Yet, I always felt in the last couple of years when there was a lot of scrutiny on Rashford at Manchester United. There's always scrutiny on him there, but when he turned up at England, he just felt a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more at home. Maybe it's because Southgate gave him a bit more love, and he is the type of player who does need that support from a manager. But I certainly wouldn't write him off. I mean, with that pace that he's got, I mean, one of his issues is Anthony Gordon. We talked to Southgate about this. Anthony Gordon's had such a good season at Newcastle United. He gave that different element down the left, which Rashford could bring, i.e. that supreme pace against slightly nervy right back if England wanted to stretch them. Because all the other players England have got who come in off the left, whether it's a Foden, whether it's a Grealish, whether it's an Eze, you know, they don't go outside the fullback, whereas Rashford can just burn them off with his pace. Also, what Rashford offered, he would have allowed Southgate to only take two strikers, which he may well do anyway, and he has done in the previous two tournaments. But that was because Rashford could slot in as the third striker. I always look for an element of redemption with players, and the just disgraceful abuse, the racist abuse that Marcus Rashford endured after the last European Championships when he missed the penalty along with Sancho and Bukayo Saka. You would just hope there was some sort of arc there where he would come back and score a penalty and just have that supreme moment. But he's not to have that. But from Manchester United's perspective, you're going to get a player who's absolutely fit and firing for next season. I don't like all these stories about, he'll go to PSG and he'll be better there. He loves Manchester United. He just needs to sort of have a summer clearing his head and just focusing on delivering for Manchester United next season. Because look, I've not talked to him for ages, but one thing I know about Marcus Rashford is he cares about Manchester United.
With that, a key factor that many people believe attributed to the dip in form was the absence of Luke Shaw, because the pair seem to have this unique bond on the left wing for Manchester United and England, and it wouldn't be the first time that the Wooden Shaw man has suffered without the fullback behind him. Now, with that, despite Shaw's lack of football since pulling up against Luton in February, do you feel that the defender merits a place in Southgate's final squad from what you've seen?
First, it's a really good point about Luke Shaw and Marcus Rashford. I've been to so many tournaments with England. I think this is my 15th or 16th. They all tend to blur into one. But, you know, England's history, we can go back even further, go back to the sort of the 80s. England's history of taking semi-fit players to tournaments is well established. Obviously, Southgate's got a little bit more license, as in the last two tournaments, in terms of it's 26, not 23. But he doesn't really have much choice on Shaw. I mean, Shaw is slowly returning to training, but there's no way he'll be fit. Certainly in the group stages, and certainly in I would have thought the round of 16, and also particularly the way that he plays. You want a buccaneering, overlapping Luke Shaw getting in down the left. But at the moment, it'll be Kieran Trippier in there, which is right foot at left back, which reduces some of the threats, the obvious threat down the flank, in that you can't ping a ball immediately down the flank like Luke Shaw can. So, yeah, I mean, Luke Shaw he scored in the final last time. He's such an important player for England. Also a popular character, quite understated, but quite a popular character around the camp as well. So I mean, England need him fit.
And so do Manchester United.
Yeah, but he will be fit for Manchester United by the start of next season. Absolutely. I mean, in a way, you can't go wrong because he either builds up his fitness with England or has a summer off and comes flying into the new season with you.
I saw that you tweeted about Shaw's individual training regime. How has that been going? Because many United fans raised an eyebrow about his lack of availability throughout the season and then only to go on and gain selection for England. I know that he's not fit and I know the likelihood of him featuring is very, very slim. But a lot of United supporters were looking at it and maybe questioning why the availability wasn't there throughout the season, and yet now he's out there with the squad for Gareth Southgate.
Well, because he's easing his way back in, and if Manchester United's season had gone on another 2-3 weeks, it would have been the same process. I mean, this whole club versus country thing, that's tended to have disappeared now. The clubs work closely with England; it's in their interest. There's also been a crossover down the years between physios, people in the medical department working at clubs, and then working for the national setup in the age groups or the senior teams. So they know each other. They will have regular contact. It's not in anyone's interest to push Luke Shaw. Southgate wouldn't do that. England wouldn't do that, because you can't. You don't. The last thing you want to do is take a player out, and then he breaks down out in out in Germany. So no, they would have been communicating, and whether he'd been with club or country, this process would have been going on. Obviously, if there was no tournament this summer, he would have been off on the beach and sort of recovering and probably doing his own personal rehab with his own physio or club physio. But that's effectively what's happening with England, whether up at St George's or Tottenham Hotspur training ground.
Obviously, Manchester United supporters have a keen eye on the English side with the inclusion of Kobbie Mainoo, who obviously took the world by storm with this amazing debut campaign, recently voted FA Cup Player of the Season as well. How has he integrated into this squad ahead of this major tournament? And is it literally a continuation of what we're seeing? An old head on young shoulders, a mentality that seems to be completely unfazed by whatever opposition or prospect is up against him?
He's got a challenge with Wharton coming in from Palace and doing so well against Bosnia. Came on for half an hour and doing well, but Kobbie Mainoo with his performances for England and particularly for Manchester United Cup final before that. But I was at Molineux when he scored that goal late on, so he can play that sort of slightly more threatening role. But he's just the type of player that England need. Don't know whether he will start, but alongside Declan Rice if Southgate goes a little bit more cautious. But in terms of your point, absolutely, he's a good person as well as a good player, good citizen, as the FA calls him, good tourist. They know he'll go out to Germany if he's selected, and will settle in. He's popular with the other players. It's quite interesting when players on England duty do their media interviews. There's always someone from the FA either sitting in with them, partly to keep the clubs happy, partly to keep us in check, but also just to see how the player handles it, and that's just so important. And they've started doing it with some of the younger age groups just to give them that experience. Because if you can't take responsibility in a room talking about yourself with a group of journalists, then how can you take responsibility on the pitch? It's really important that they learn to take responsibility. And Kobbie Mainoo, I mean, he's been kept away from print so far, but I think in his broadcast ones, he just didn't put a foot wrong, a bit like he is on the pitch.
Lastly, because I know you're busy, moving away from international football and just back to United, I'd just like to focus on the future of Bruno Fernandes and further uncertainty around Manchester United. The Portuguese captain, very much like his manager, has been the centre of much speculation the past month, with public statements confirming his desire to stay at Old Trafford as long as his determination was matched by the hierarchy in the club and moving forward. How important is the player for a successful Ineos rebuild?
Oh, he has to stay at Manchester United. I just think that emotional connection he has with the fans, the fact that when you see him go off the pitch, he's either disappointed that he's not involved anymore, or he's absolutely soaked in sweat because he's given everything. I mean, look, he's annoying at times. He's a pest. He argues with, or he's constantly moaning. It's almost like he wants to be referee and in charge of VAR when it should be left to the officials. Although actually he might do a better job. But yeah, he's just such an important player because he cares. You can just see him. He cares about Manchester United. He cares about doing well. He cares about the result. He cares about the performance, and you really need players like that, and he's got that. So in terms of will he stay? I mean, Manchester United is still one of the biggest clubs in the world. You're the biggest club in the world after Real Madrid. I know you're not in the Champions League. I know you've got issues, but you've got new owners. I'm sure he's well paid. He's obviously committed. Why would he necessarily leave? And I think, look, there's a rhythm, particularly at this time of year, with players' comments, because they go away on international duty. They're sitting down. A lot of them are talking to journalists that they've known as when they were breaking through in their homeland. And maybe there's a little bit more trust. I don't know, but they open up, and the quotes obviously. They open up about their future inevitably because they're away from their clubs. Um, but I thought he spoke well. And if he is challenging the Ineos leadership in a way to match his ambition, that's fantastic. And that will be absolute manna from heaven for Brailton and Ratcliffe, because that's the type of individual they want. They want this pursuit of excellence. You've seen in some of the emails that Jim Ratcliffe's been sending out, this almost not riding roughshod, but just this desire from his perspective for excellence, for success, and Bruno has that in different ways. And look, he's such an intelligent player. And I hate him when he plays wide. I think he's fantastic through the middle. I think that, whether it's an 8 or whether it's a false 9, I think that suits him. And he's really played well there because he's such an intelligent player. And I think he's going to have a long time out in at the Euros, because I think they'll go far.
Seeing as you're there and you're immersed in it, will England go all the way, or who have you got picked for the Euros?
England have got a front 6 to get to the final, but a back 4 unless Shaw and Maguire. You see, Maguire, I haven't really touched on Maguire. Maguire is such an important player for England. Everyone sort of doubts him, but I like the way. Look, I've criticised him, whether it was over Mykonos, whether it was being turned by quicker forwards. But whenever you see Maguire, he comes up and has a chat. I like the way he deals with adversity. He's been through some difficult times with you. He may possibly even almost left a year ago. A lot of criticism of him, and yet he's never hidden. And the same with England as well. He's been absolutely brilliant on that. So, yeah, Maguire. But the defence is an issue because Maguire won't be 100% fit. Luke Shaw won't even be 80% fit. Then you got Stones and Walker. Walker's had a good season. Stones been slightly in and out, but still a top talent. And you've got Jordan Pickford behind them. Pickford's really good, but there's a gap between England's number 1 and England's number 2, Ramsdale. Ramsdale's been sitting on the bench at Arsenal. So, wrap up Pickford in cotton wool. So, yes, a front 6 that can get to the final, a back 4 which can get to the round of 16, and then it all depends when you bump into a France or a Portugal. Is it France in the semis? I haven't really done the maths, but because England are not always that predictable. So, but look, England have got a chance. They've certainly got the players to do well in this tournament. I mean, it's ridiculous the amount of talent they have. Cole Palmer's not going to start. Bukayo Saka will start, but Cole Palmer's had an amazing season. Phil Foden, obviously, he's going to start. Kobbie Mainoo, you know how good he is, but he may not start. The amount of talent that England have got is off the scale.
Maybe it'll just have to come down to an adage of Fergie of old, and if they score 5, you'll have to score 6. Henry, it was an absolute pleasure to speak with you today. What have you got coming up outside of the Euros? Anything you'd like to share with any of the listeners that you have on your own part and your professional side?
Well, I'm writing 2 books at the moment, which will be announced shortly. I think one's going to be announced next week. I've got some writing work that will be announced just before the Euros. But I'm going to the Euros to do, I'm doing the BBC, doing TalkSport, doing a few other things. I do a daily Substack thing, which I quite enjoy because I sort of get up about 5 o'clock in the morning and try to get it done by 8:30. And it's just a sort of take on what's going on in football, but also stepping back a little bit and bringing the perspective, because I'm old now, and bringing the perspective of 3 and a bit decades decaying, writing about football. So, that's always fun. Do you know what? It's quite simple. As long as there's football being played, I'm happy.
I could not put it any better than that. If you'd like to get in touch with me, you can do so on Twitter at Shaun Connolly 85. Be sure and follow our platform account at theatre_of_red on all of your social platforms, and hit subscribe wherever you're listening to this podcast today. Have a great weekend. We'll catch you all next week.